Hi friends, Roxanne here. I just wanted to share a little bit out of my joy journal. This is last year's. I'm just finishing up some of the pictures. And this was a page, kind of like a little conglomeration. I've put this face in the sky. It's just things that she's thinking about of this trip to lavender fields in Provence. And of course I put grande imagination. All right, so I wanted to talk about just adding some variety of color in your fields so that you're not using just one color. I've got my palette and I'm going to be using a little bit of, let's see, ultramarine rose, quinacridone rose, and ultramarine, as well as cobalt blue, and a little bit of lavender. It's a little bit more opaque, but I want to do a little bit of that in there. And then just for the greenery, I'm going to pop in a bit of turquoise that I've mixed with some of the cobalt blue just to get an interesting, really pretty green. And my reference for that page is from unsplash.com, but it reminds me of a field that I was in back in 2019 down in Provence. And anyway, so let me just talk about this a little bit. I'm gonna see if I can wet my colors a little bit. Had the lid open overnight, so they're all super dried out because the heat is on in the house. It's cold here. I'm in Connecticut. All right, and then I have just leftover stuff. I'll just give that a squirt because I'll probably end up using that too. And let's see. I've got just a couple of rows here I want to finish. So I've got mixed up in this little puddle a little bit of this rose of ultramarine, which is essentially the manufacturer has mixed up quinacridone rose and ultramarine, but it's sort of nice to have this convenience color. Makes a really nice purple. And then I'm going to pull in just a little bit of ultramarine blue. And then this end of the puddle, I'm going to really darken with a bit of ultramarine. So, oh yeah, and that middle part of the puddle, I wanted cobalt blue and a little bit of rose of ultramarine. And I always test my colors on a little scrap sheet. You can see I've tested all kinds of stuff here. And I just, that way I can see if I like it before I commit to my page. So I'm just going to spread this color across these. and I don't even have to stay in the lines. I think I actually need a bigger brush. That is a little 6 and it's kind of too small. So let me jump up to the 10. I need a little more brush power. Otherwise it just gets too strokey looking. And let's just bring that down. And you can see on this photograph, you've got some of these edges that as that lump of lavender rolls over and it's near the edges, it's kind of the shadowed edge. And so that is going to be a little bit darker. And then there's going to be some of the areas near the top that are sticking up the most. They're going to be a little bit lighter because they're getting hit the most by light. And then you've got a little bit of greens dropped in. Well, we'll get to that. Let's get that darker bit. Let's see. And I'm going to go a little bit heavier on the ultramarine there. So I can just drop that in and kind of mix it as I go. And as these rows kind of crest this hill in the distance, they're sort of touching each other. I don't know if you noticed that. So, if you've got a reference that's really interesting, kind of go with it. And, sometimes you can just exaggerate that just to get that look. And so look at your reference and see where the darks are. Where does it touch lighter areas? So the darks are showing up on this ridge, and I can actually, this could use to be darkened, even though I painted this yesterday. I can still go back over it today. And I'm leaving these spaces. I'm using a little bit of, I'm going to fill these in with some colors for a little brown earth, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But as I go down this row of lavender, I'm going to keep this lightest area near the top. And so in some of the spaces, I might get a little splash of Daniel Smith's lavender and just drop that near the top. It's an opaque color, so as this spreads, it's going to kind of granulate out a little bit differently. You can see some of this, how it settles into this paper. And this is a hot press. This is a Stillman & Burns Zeta series book, so it's got smooth paper. And I like that smooth surface because it's fun to draw on. It makes your ink pens feel like you're just ice skating on smooth ice. If you've ever felt that, it's a wonderful feeling as opposed to scratchy, rough, bumpy stuff that trips you up. All right, so I've covered, I've extended this down to the front. I want some of these edges, especially this inside edge, to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to beef that up with a little bit darker color. Where this comes on the inside and meets this row, this appears a little lighter on this side and this appears a little darker on this side. Now, this is getting watery near this front end, so I want to beef that up with a little color. And I'm going to drop in some more of the cobalt with that rose of ultramarine. God, it's hard to say. And then I'm going to drop in a little bit of Daniel Smith's lavender. And, if you feel like you want a little bit more of the rosy color to pop out of that, I just drop in a little, I'm going to mix some quinacridone rose into my puddle. I think if I use it, fresh out of the pan, it would be just too strong. So I'm going to mix up a little more of my quin rose and cobalt and just leave it be on the rosier side. And then just drop some of that in. Since this is still wet, the areas where I drop this color in are going to kind of bloom out and push that color. And I love it when it's all still kind of nice and flowy. I think it adds just some, some people don't like those blossom shapes, but in some instances where you've got foliage, I think it's kind of a neat addition. And I'm going to just beef up that darkness over there. And then let's start this row. Do the same thing. We'll just bring that down. I'm going to leave it a little rosier on the inside. And then since this is still wet, they may fuse together. And I'm okay with that. It's a sketchbook after all. Sketchbooks are kind of where you allow at least to me, you can allow what happens to happen. And this is still kind of like curving over the hill as it goes off into the distance. And, oh yeah, I did want to drop some of that green in because you do see some of the stems in some areas. So for that green, I had mixed up a little bit of the that Cobalt Turquoise. And I think I had a little bit of cobalt blue that I pulled into it. Let's test that on my scrap sheet. That's a little bit bluer than I want, so I'm going to pull in just a tad of this green gold. Just to green it up. Let's see if that looks better. Oh, yeah, I'm liking that. Okay, so I'm going to just drop a little bit of that in. And yes, it's going to run and fuse because this is all still wet. And I'm okay with that too because I just want those soft edges of those little places. Now, I've got a real puddle coming at the end of my page. It's going to just drip off. So I'm going to make a thirsty brush by pulling out all the moisture. Let's just slurp that up like a nice little wet vac. Do it again. Slurp that up like a wet vac. And then let's finish these last 2 rows because they're like the dinkiest rows ever, and that'll go pretty fast. Okay, that's a really pale wash. Let's get in my dark areas. Where these hills are touching. And I want to darken up this side too. It's sort of flowing out into Nowheresville. So I do want to just beef that darkness up just a little bit along that edge. And then let's get this. And there's just such a dinky little bit of that left. And I'm going to drop in a little bit of that Daniel Smith lavender, because when that opaque color just kind of settles in on top of that, I think it just adds some interesting things. I'm going to drop it in on this too, because I think it's all but disappeared. Okay, we'll let that dry, because while I don't mind if these all blend and run together, if I were to add that dirt between them right now, it would just blend into a big hot mess. But on these rows where it is dry, let's go ahead and do a couple of those. So for that, I was testing out my burnt sienna and then quinacridone gold. Quinacridone gold really makes things glow. And let's kind of give them a squirt to loosen them up. They're looking kind of dry. So again, I'm going to test them on my test swatch sheet just to make sure I like what I see. So I'm going to first lay some in on my palette. So I'm dropping a little bit of Quin Gold and a little bit of Burnt Sienna. You can see they're close in range. The Burnt Sienna is a little darker, but that Quin Gold really pops. So I like how that looks. I'm going to use that. And we'll put that on a couple of these rows where things are already dry. And this is going to go pretty fast at this point. And, you know, notice I'm not being super picky exacting. If it squinches over into the edges of my purple, it's not really going to show. All right, that's a dry one. So we'll go here. And then I'm going to let those dry before I finish those. I've got a couple over here, a couple of rows over here to finish. But you know what you're doing now. And then I'm going to add this back field with a really soft purpley blue, and then add my tree on last. Sometimes you'll see these lone olive trees, or some other varieties of trees, but you'll see these big lonesome trees out in the middle of the field. Good place for the farmer to catch a bit of shade. Anyway, love what's going on here. I'll reassess it as it all dries. I may beef up some color here and there, but I think I'm liking what I'm seeing. And I've kept it super simple. It goes really fast. So I hope you'll try mixing some of your colors too, and you'll get a much more exciting blend going on than if you had just used one color straight out of the pan. So if you like this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. That really helps. And you can join my Facebook group, Traveling Light with Watercolor. So hope to see you guys soon and hope you're off to a great Painterly New Year 2025. Thanks. Bye.